I'm 53 years old. I have 3 children. I have 2 little darling grandsons who are absolutely beautiful. I'm from the Atherton Tablelands, which is in far north Queensland. I am Yirinji Mcbarbarum and obviously many others, but those are the 2 main groups that I identify with. I was raised and born and raised in the Atherton Hospital, but kind of moved back and forward from a place called Mount Garnet to Atherton, to Mount Garnet through the years of family looking for work and stuff like that. I have some memories of living on a reserve, aptly named Pinnacle Pocket, which I think is a beautiful name. I don't know what else to say, really. There's a lot of things around the fact that, Assemblies of God was the religious domination, is it? Or is it the domination? Denomination. The religious denomination that, which is Pentecostal religion that that I suppose ran the reserve or mission. Most of my family was based there. What else? A lot of other people obviously lived there, so you kind of built that communal relationship. People called each other auntie and uncles and cousins and sisters, and that real sort of warm, I won't say fuzzy, but, I guess a sense of belonging in terms of, because everyone still talks about Pinnacle Pocket as a place of great memory, a fond memory, and they talk about it with such love and care, and especially the old people and all that stuff. Okay. There's probably more I could talk about, but, It actually came about, I was always a reader. I was always someone who, because I was the 4th of 12 children, I had to basically look after the younger ones. So I was more like the carer of the younger ones, if that kind of worked. Not that my mother and father, weren't, but I can remember, doing the big sister kind of duties around changing nappies, feeding babies, washing nappies, all of that kind of domestic stuff. But I always tried to find time to read. I loved the idea of reading, and I loved the way that reading could take you to other places. So I guess in a way it took me out of some of the kind of stuff that was happening, I guess, in the home. And I used to hide. So I can remember once being in a orange tree trying to read. I can remember being at the back of the car, right down the back, like not in the boot, but down the floor, trying to read so that I could have the opportunity to, I guess, engage in that sort of stuff, because my mother used to call me Princess Grace. I don't know why she called me Princess Grace, because I could never understand that. I think it was the reading stuff. Anyway, I think studying probably was the next best thing to the idea of trying to read. Yeah, I don't know if schooling worked for me in terms of, achieving good results, because I left at year 10. I don't even know if I got my junior certificate. I do remember. It's interesting about schooling, because you remember things around fighting, like in terms of social justice. I remember I was always the one who helped the one that would get hurt, or the one who was seen as a cripple, if that makes sense, or the one who was, the silent one, that really quiet person. I used to always try and make friends with them. So I was a kind of a social justice person. Study, I guess, was my right, but after many years, I had my eldest girl, Hayley. Even though I used to read a lot, I didn't think about studying until Carey when I had my second child, and I went to, I think it was South Australia College of Education around then. I did a diploma in AB studies, and I can remember being quite angry about racism, particularly around understanding what was coming out of what I was reading. It's not like I didn't know that it was happening, but to see it actually articulated, I guess, in text, kind of added to the frustration and added to the anger. So I'd throw books across the kitchen floor. It was after the kids went to bed, so I wasn't kind of one of those people that did it all in front of the kids. I used to study at 9 o'clock at night, 9:30, till the early hours of the morning. But it was purely based on the fact that I loved reading and I loved finding information. So for me, study was the next best thing. I guess it was a growth. You have to grow, I think, as a person, and you have to grow, I guess, as a human being. So for me, understanding racism, understanding why the world was the way it was, why did... I get emotional. You want to stop for a while? Why did... I guess why was my people so hated? Why was it not right to be Aboriginal? Why were we being spat at? Why was there so much violence? Why do people cross the road when you walk down the same street? Why do people call you a dirty black thing or a filthy pig? So I guess it was that kind of stuff that I needed to understand. And I guess I didn't understand until I actually read about it, until I actually saw that there were reasons why people thought like that. There were reasons why, the Barron River behind the reserve was getting less and less water. There were reasons for that. And it was invasion. It was colonisation. But you don't know that until you study it. You don't know that until you read about it. You don't know about the half-caste and the quarter-caste thing until you understand blood, eugenics, the blood quantum stuff. You don't know that when you're a child trying to deal with racism or, policies of integration or policies of assimilation. You don't understand any of that when you're a child. So study for me was about making that real. It was about grasping the whys. Why was that happening? And a feeling of empowerment. It wasn't like I didn't want to have to shape up and fight. I didn't want to have to be called a nigger or a boong or an abo. I didn't want to have to challenge, those students who gave me a hard time around my blackness or my womanness or my girlness. I didn't want that. I wanted every right to be who I wanted to be in this world. And I think that's why I did what I want. That's why I studied. And I think it was also because I didn't want my children to have to deal with that. I didn't want them... I didn't want them facing the same bullshit or the same crap that I'd faced. I didn't want that. I wanted them to be strong. I wanted them to be black. And I just wanted them to be the people that they are. And I hope that that's who they are. I hope that somewhere they are like that. Well, I guess it all comes from... It's interesting, I started off as a Aboriginal education worker, but it didn't mean that I wasn't engaging in classroom things that were happening in the classroom, because I was always the kind of mother that would front up at schools if anything ever happened to any of my kids. And I called racism for what it was, and I would actually challenge people on that, on that sort of stuff. So I guess the classroom stuff for me was always something, or schooling was always something that I valued as an important part of life, I guess. So I got a job as an Aboriginal education worker back in 1990s, and I started working with Anangu kids at the Wiltshire program. And we started off in Woodville High School with probably 5 girls. There was no boys. And so working with those girls also, reaffirmed or added to my my cultural, I don't know if it's cultural, my kind of Aboriginality, if that makes sense, my connection to, to the Aboriginal stuff, if you want to say that. It sounds really fun.
To living here?
No, it was about being away from home. Yes, yeah, you're right. It was some of that stuff, but it was also about community. I needed that kind of community context. And so working with the Anangu mob gave me an understanding that, wow, Aboriginal language is still, huge. They speak their language, Wow, they can talk about dreaming stories. They can tell me stuff around Uluru, and that sort of stuff. So for me it was like, it wasn't, I don't know, you know how you have something that's, it's like out there, but not here, does that make sense? But when I was in that situation, I was able to be a part of that stuff. So I don't know, obviously there's an academic word for it, how we talk about it. So it's probably the inside-outsider kind of perspective. I don't know if that's true. But I found that I gathered strength from being with the mob, and having the respect of the elders, and also learning that respect, because I didn't have my elders, so I had to be respectful of them, and I could follow the protocols of that kind of relationship and partnership, I guess. But as is always in an educational institution, the dominant power is at play. The teacher who wants the Aboriginal student or the Anangu student to hurry up and complete something. We want something. We want evidence that you can do something. Found that really hard. The fact that they would try very hard. Because there was always this thing around saying, you have to be like the white man. We want you to actually, and I guess it was PYEC or something. I don't know if you want to say that in the thing. But there was this idea that they sent their kids to Adelaide to actually get the education, which I think is okay. But I think, I don't know, I think we needed to respect what they brought to the space, if that makes sense. To the site. So I was all about, that was my classroom experiences as an AC or an AEW at that point. That was around the social justice stuff too. It wasn't the social inclusion stuff, it was around the social justice. So everybody talked about social justice. Whether they performed social justice was another story. But I think at all times I tried to advocate for the rights of those students. Understanding that, whatever happened in the community would affect them, that there could be times when things could be quite violent in terms of resistance to the teaching stuff. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, isn't there, in the classroom situation that you can speak to. You can talk to the teacher who ignores the Aboriginal child or sends the Aboriginal child, out to time out, not understanding that the student or the Aboriginal student, the student is only late because something happened the night before. There was a death in the family, or the police had come around, or, so understanding, I guess my job as an AEW was understanding what was happening outside of the classroom, and understanding that when the students came into the classroom, that stuff didn't stay outside. They couldn't not be Aboriginal with all of whatever they were going through. That came into the classroom. So understanding that, I think, provided provided greater connections or greater understandings, or a sense of that social justice stuff. There's a lot of things I could talk about. We're talking 20-something years of teaching or being in the classroom, So it varies, doesn't it? You have the experiences in the classroom with your own kids. You have the experience of the classroom with other people's kids, and then you have the classroom experience as the teacher yourself. And so there are various levels of experiences that occurs in the context of all of those things. So as a mother, as a community member, I kind of had to fight for the rights of my children, turning up, I can remember one incident, should I share that? I can remember one incident when we took our kids over to Melbourne because the two girls wanted to go to a rock concert. So we said, yeah. So we all got in the car and we all went over to Melbourne and spent the weekend there. And it was fantastic, we stayed right in the city of Melbourne. The kids went to the concert with Greg. And we were heading home the next day and our car broke down. So we obviously had to catch a train home. The beautiful thing about that was Carrie Jean, my middle girl, wanted to go to school. She was about 11 or 12. She wanted to go to school and tell her teacher. And so we'd taken a train back to Adelaide. So we dropped her off. We all got picked up, dropped her off. So I dropped her off at school, which was fine. And the teacher started, it was interesting. Carrie came home and told me that day that the teacher said something like yeah, I know why you want to go over there. You just want to have a look at all those boys or all those fellas. And I just went, this girl is only young. She is thoroughly excited about the idea of being allowed to go. She went to Melbourne, that's a big thing. She went to a concert, that's a big thing. And then a teacher does that to her, and even though she liked him. So I thought, I'm not going to accept it. I started to get a bit irate, I guess, or a bit gully up, angry about the teacher saying that. And I thought there was sexual innuendos, and I'm still not too sure, but I thought, no, I think I need to talk to this teacher. And so I can remember ringing up the principal and telling the principal that I'm coming in and I will talk to this teacher, and I want you to understand that I'm letting you know first because this is what's going to happen. I want a written apology, and I want him to actually say to my daughter that I'm very sorry. I want this to, I want something. I want a response. And so I turned up. And I wasn't irate. I just walked around and I just gave him a lesson in, how Aboriginal women have been perceived as, objects, and, because I was raised in Mount Garnet. Look, I was raised in, in Queensland and all that stuff around the sexualisation of the Indigenous woman. And I didn't want my children to have any kind of... Does that make sense? And so I was that kind of person. So I rang up and I sort of challenged the teacher on that, and I spoke to the male teacher and said that's what I want. And I think at the end of it he actually... Kerry says they were always scared of me, but I don't think I was that. I think they were scared of me probably because I could speak their language or the discourse, if that makes sense. I'm talking like an academic, yeah. So that was one story about that. So that's the kind of experiences. That's only one of many. As an AC, just in my experiences, relationship, I find it really hard. We're talking inclusivity, aren't we? we're talking about trying to understand Indigenous ways of learning or Indigenous knowledge systems. I guess the university at the moment is probably the best place. I don't know if it's happened in the secondary sector or in the primary sector, which are the sectors that I've worked in. I can't remember the idea of it. Obviously, it happened, you know, because we've got some good stuff coming out. We've got some good teachers coming out. So maybe there is. I don't know. I think this topic, I think our educational topic, you know, reflecting on my own university, you know, in my role to become a teacher, I don't think that UniSA, when I was becoming a teacher, reflected in some way what I'm teaching now, or the stuff I'm engaging in this context here, or in this university space. I think it's a bit different. I don't know whether I wasn't looking for it. I don't know any of that stuff. I just remember that when I was doing my teaching degree, I didn't talk about, even though we had Ducky, I didn't talk about, even though I was going to UniSA, I think it was called the David Unipen School. I can't remember a topic like our topic. There was many topics like the one you're doing, like Aboriginal, Introduction to Aboriginal Studies, but there was nothing that talked in a critical race theory, critical thinking, unpacking all of that kind of stuff that talks to how Indigenous peoples are portrayed. I think that's probably... I was just thinking about that the other day. I was thinking, I don't seem to recall any of that. So if that means inclusive or not being inclusive, I don't think, to my reflecting on it, I don't know if they were inclusive. I do know that they expected me to know everything in the classroom because I was the one black fella there. So any Aboriginal issues, I knew that they expected me to have all the answers. Crazy. But I think this topic here is inclusive. I just think students need to get their head together and understand that it is inclusive. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I know what you're saying. There needs to be a transformative process at the end of it. And I think we talk transformation. I think our topic, expects that in some way. And if you're not engaged in a transformative process, then who the heck are, why are you doing it is probably what I'm saying. I think the idea of citizenship is an important one. I want to know what that means for young Australians today. What does citizenship mean to you? Understanding that we weren't citizens until 1967. What does that mean, How do we sprout our national identity, and believing that we have every right to actually say who is and who isn't Australian, and yet we don't consider that First Peoples are people like us, We are the First Peoples. So what does that mean when you talk citizenship? What does that mean when you talk terra nullius? What does that mean when you talk invasion? What does that mean when you talk dispossession? All of those things that actually we understand, we carry with us because it's an embedded process. It doesn't make us any less Aboriginal or any less sovereign peoples. It's that kind of stuff. It's understanding... It's understanding what that means in terms of this whole idea of who is and who isn't Australian, Like, I would rather be Yidinji and McBarbaram than I would rather be Australian. Like, it doesn't make me feel good about anything because there's so much disappointing things that have occurred through this idea of you can only do it if you're an Australian. Like, I don't get that. But how do I teach as an educator? How do I talk about that? How do I teach about that in the context of our topics, in the context of this institution of power? How do I talk about that stuff? So these are the questions I ask myself every day. And as I get older, I think, what will be my legacy? Maybe it will be the student who comes up out of the blue and says, "Hello, Faye, I remember you from," or the student who, while I'm on holiday, calls out my name and remembers me from teaching, teaching him in school, So maybe that's the legacy. Maybe it's the Nunga students who come up and still hugs me and says, "How you going, Auntie?" Maybe it's that stuff. Maybe that's the educational stuff. So it's not really, I know I earn good money, but maybe it's not about the money. Maybe it's more about the life skills, or I don't know. I've been talking about love a lot lately. It's that stuff I talked about at the beginning about the disappointments and not understanding who we are as First Nations people, to understanding ourselves as sovereign beings, to understanding ourselves as we have every right to love our culture. We have every right to love our culture. We have every right to love our mob. Why is it that we feel shame? Gloria Anzula says, "I will not be ashamed, nor will I shame others." And that's my catchphrase, I will not be a victim. It's that kind of stuff. And I think that, for me, is the educational guidelines by which I want to be able to actually engage with students. I want to perform that. I don't want it to just be, and it's a headspace thing. I want it to be a lived reality. I want students to leave my classroom knowing that they've learned something, even if it's understanding Pinnacle Pocket, even if it's understanding, the stolen generation, even if it's deconstructing the apology, I just want something. I want them to leave with something. It's hard work. But there's as you were saying, there's a belief in that. There has to be a belief in that. There. And so that's probably the love stuff. That's probably the love stuff for me. So I don't know. I do want to have a holiday. I do want to have, some time out so that I can gather myself again, so that I can strengthen, so that I can visit my mob, because in this space you get thirsty, you get hungry, you kind of, it's like a starvation, or a, when you don't drink enough water. What's that word? Dehydrated. You get dehydrated in this space because you're always giving. And I was saying to someone the other day, in the topic that we teach and in the classes that we go to in this context, we actually lay ourselves bare. We go, "Okay, come to me, take from me what you want, take it all. But just remember, there are some things that I will not give you because I have to be able to keep that for myself." And that's the dehydration kind of process. And so getting back to the community, I think, is really an important factor in how we survive in this space. It's an important factor in how we name ourselves as Yirinji or Mokbarba or Ghana or any of those things that helps us be who we want to be. I think and I fear sometimes that I'll never get there, but I don't want that to stop me from trying. So it's interesting. There's a whole lot of things going on in my head at the moment around age, and around education and around legacy and around who I want to be and all of that sort of stuff. So it's a whole lot of reflection happening after 20-something years of being in a space where knowledge is power. And what you do with that power, what you do with that knowledge once you get it. How responsible will you become? Interesting, eh? Well, I think not even in the context of teaching, I just think in the context of understanding themselves as young, black and deadly. Young, black and deadly. How do you be deadly people? Well, I worry. I don't worry. I think about that a lot, and I think I would rather be teaching Aboriginal students. I would rather be empowering Aboriginal students. I talk with some of the young teachers, and I'm happy to say that from my conversations with them, they're very excited about education. They're very excited about what they're learning. I think they understand that racism is at play in the context sometimes, and I think that needs to be something we challenge. I think young Indigenous peoples understand themselves as raced, and so I think we need to take all of that and kind of maybe flip it and make them comfortable, or make them, how can I explain it? I'm thinking about my PhD, right? The only way I can think about what I'm thinking about. Okay, I'm thinking about a PhD, and my PhD is called Finding Hip Hop. And so what I want to do is talk to young people around connecting to community. I want them to understand, that people have paved the pathway for them, that they don't really have to fight in a way, because they've had the pathway paved for them. The reality for them is understanding themselves as Aboriginal, understanding themselves as sovereign beings, understanding themselves as internalising a shift, and none of the shame stuff again. Don't talk about shame anymore, because shame don't get you anywhere. But understanding that you can actually challenge that idea of it. So that's kind of what I want for young people. So whether that happens in education, fantastic, or whether it happens in someone getting a law degree, fantastic, whether it happens in the marine biology stuff, I think all of it's good, because there is always a process of education in that kind of process, yes? That's kind of, I think, Indigenous peoples or Aboriginal people should engage in education, because it offers a whole... It's like I was talking about first time. It offers that shift. It offers that understanding of the whys. And so engaging it is trusting yourself in understanding the whys and how you can make the whys work for you. So it's the action stuff at the end of it. So whether the action stuff is supporting, the ACO, supporting the Aboriginal students in all of their schooling, then I think that's great, because I think we need Aboriginal people in the schooling sector. I think we need to disrupt, and we need to challenge, and we need to be visible. When I talk to Aboriginal students, they talk about understanding, that the ACO is there for them, and it's about that kind of thing. So I think I think for me, I can only kind of maybe, I don't know if that's what you want, I can only talk, so as an AEW, I found, so for me as an AEW, what I found from my experiences was that there was I wasn't as powerful as I thought I was. Even though I could work really well with the Indigenous students, even though I could work really well with the Anangu students or the young, primary Aboriginal students, even though I would fight the battles for them and advocate, what I found was, as an AEW, I didn't have much say in the way the teacher and AEW relationship worked. So the teacher was always the one who knew everything. And so I thought, for me to be able to reach that level, I need to become a teacher. I need to understand what she's talking, or she or he is talking. I need to understand that position. I need to understand what they're talking about. So I became a teacher based on the fact that I wanted to stand at the front of the classroom, and I wanted students to see me as an Aboriginal person out at the front of the classroom. I didn't want to be at the back. And I can remember I was still treated like I was still treated as an AEW, even though I was a teacher. I remember taking a student across. I used to work at Ghana Plains, and I took a student across to a classroom, and I was a teacher, and the teacher in the classroom expected me to fix up some problem that was occurring. And she said, "But you're the AEW, aren't you? You're the AEW, fix it up." And it was just something happening between a couple of students, and it was about learning in the classroom. And I just went, "No, I'm actually the same as you. I'm actually a teacher. So you fix up the problem because you have duty of care of these students." And I walked out. And so for me, that was an empowered feeling. So I think if I could encourage, people to be teachers, I think there is actually power in it. And I think you can actually talk back. It's almost like you can tell them to get stuffed. You might know all this stuff, but I also know some stuff too. So it's about I really believe there's power in being an educator and understanding what that means. I worry, though, for some of the non-Indigenous students at the moment who are becoming teachers and whether they will abuse their power. There's power, I think, in being an educator. How did I become Okay, so I was on long service leave. I'd just come back from Queensland, yay, doing substitute teaching in North Queensland, in my old kind of town, getting to know some of the kids the children of classmates, teaching them. And then came back and Daryl and Simone, I don't know if you were there, yeah? So you remember, spotted me and came over and asked me if I wanted to have a job. And it was really interesting because it was like the right time because I didn't know whether I wanted to go back to where I was teaching. I think I could have had a 10-year, position, but I didn't know if that's what I wanted. Must admit though, I hadn't called myself a scholar, even though I was, I read a lot. I never called myself a scholar until I actually completed my masters. And I think it was because I actually had the space to complete my masters and I enjoyed the idea of my masters. So that was when I was able to say, okay, I think I'm an academic. And that's because I started to look at things like Foucault and, people who talked about power and knowledge and understood some of the philosophy and that around it and where it all springs from. I think that's what made me kind of consider myself an academic. And I still, to this day, though, think I'm not. But sometimes I go, yes, no, I am. It's okay. I'm an academic, yay! But I'm not. I don't big note myself, except here. Nah, I don't big note myself. Yeah. I try not to big note myself. I don't want to be, someone who's, I don't know. I just want to be who I am. That's all. And give the support to other Indigenous students who are coming through, regardless of where they come from, what they're up to, what degree they're doing. I just want to be able to kind of do that supportive advocating, social justice stuff, so they get through. But yeah, I'm an academic. I think it's a reality check. I mean, I don't know if it's a reality check. I think it's a lived reality. I think I'd gotten to a space, I'd gotten to a place in my life where I kind of thought, enough's enough. I don't want to justify, who I am as an Aboriginal person. I don't want to justify who I am as an Aboriginal woman. I just want to be able to be. And so I wanted it to be an embodied kind of, an embodied thing. And so everything that makes me who I am now is what I take into the classroom. And people can like it or they don't have to like it. And it doesn't matter. So if that means that there's a new looking at me, then that's okay. Because I've gone through the fire, I've done the hard yards. And so I think now I'm probably at a place where no one can actually, I hope I'm at a place where no one can not. Well, when no one, I don't have to care whether they like me or not. I think I'm the text. I'm the living text. That's how I see things now. And so when I walk into a classroom, I'm there. I'm visible. I'm alive. Everything that makes me black, everything that makes me a woman, everything that makes me Aboriginal or Indigenous or Yidinji, McBarbara, I'm there. That's what I am. That, I think, is what makes a difference. Because we never had that. That's what makes a difference. And even though we're still a minority, within that minority, we're starting to be seen on the landscape. And I think that's the thing I like about my job as a teacher. That I can walk out of there and become a community member, But that's too. And I can be a community member. I can be a sister, an auntie, a mother, a grandmother. I can be all of those things. But when I walk into that classroom, I'm actually a teacher. I'm actually an educator. But everything that makes me that educator is what I take into that classroom. And I think that's the important thing for me as an educator. That's what makes me like the job. Even though I'm tired, that's what makes me love the job. And I think it's actually the best thing I've ever done. Sometimes I wish I could do law. Sometimes I want to be a lawyer because it means I can talk up. But do I have the energy? Sometimes I want to be a doctor. Do I have enough nous to do that? You know, so and that's what I like about it, because I can see the possibilities. You know, I mean, yeah. People talk about you being a living text, you know, and I think we eventually become living text. We are what we are when we walk into that space. And they can't take that away. That's the beautiful thing. They can never take that away, because we're there now. Yeah.